Your bones have what are called origins and insertions. An origin is an attachment over the stationary end of a muscle, meaning it does not move, whereas the insertion is an attachment at the mobile end of the muscle, meaning that it does move. The origin is proximal to the insertion, and the insertion is distal to the origin. Between the origin and the insertion is the belly of the muscle, which is a thicker middle region of the muscle. In our bodies, there are 4 functional groups of muscles. These contain the prime mover, also known as the agonist, the antagonist, synergist, and the fixators. The prime mover is a muscle which creates the movement and has the largest workload when producing a movement. This can be shown in these images when completing a bicep curl. The biceps brachii is the prime mover and produces the greatest amount of movement in order to lift the lower arm. However, the triceps brachii is acting as an antagonist in this example. An antagonist is the muscle which works with the prime mover but creates resistance and stretches out while the prime mover contracts. It prevents overshoot and controls the movement. In the bicep curl, the antagonist lengthens and the biceps contract to lift the weight up and support the biceps brachii from overshoot when the arm is brought down as it stabilizes the elbow joint. In this example, the triceps brachii are the antagonist. The synergist helps the prime mover by working with it by adding force. It also helps to stabilize the joint during the movement. So when the biceps brachii contract to pull up the upper arm, the brachioradialis helps to add force, meaning less strain is applied onto the biceps brachii. The brachioradialis also acts as a fixator, which prevents any unwanted movement. For example, it helps to support and stabilize the arm so that it can't create any unwanted movement and result in an injury. Your body is full of many muscles. The picture on this slide shows some of the major skeletal muscles in the body. Most of these muscles work in pairs to produce movement, and some examples of these will be examined on the next couple of slides. Your largest skeletal muscle is your gluteus maximus, which can be found here. And your smallest skeletal muscle is your stapedius, which is found in the middle of your ear. As you can see in this grid, the anterior deltoid helps to produce flexion. The origin of the anterior deltoid is the clavicle and is able to move, whereas the insertion is the deltoid tuberosity, which cannot move. The anterior deltoid works to produce movement with the latissimus dorsi, which is its antagonist. The posterior deltoid, which is found at the back, helps to produce extension, and the origin is the scapula, found at the front of the body. This moves when extension is created, and the insertion, which is the lateral intermuscular scepter, cannot move. The antagonist of the posterior deltoid is called the latissimus dorsi and is its muscle pair. For the biceps brachii, this muscle helps to produce flexion, and the origin is the scapula. This means that the scapula can move when flexion is produced, and the insertion is the radius, so the radius doesn't move when flexion occurs. The antagonist is the triceps brachii, which helps to keep the joint stable during the movement. The triceps brachii now creates extension, and the scapula and the humerus are the origin, which means they both move when extension occurs, and the ulna is the insertion, which does not move. The antagonist is the biceps brachii, so for the biceps it's the triceps, and for the triceps it's the biceps. Unfortunately, I did not get enough time to fill in these next grids, as the Wi-Fi in the cottage is not very good, so we'll skip these. Now, as spoken about earlier in the video, there are 3 different types of muscle fibre. You have your fast twitch muscle fibres and your slow twitch muscle fibres. You have 2 different fast twitch muscle fibres called your fast glycolytic muscle fibres and your fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibres. Lastly, you have your slow twitch muscle fibres, known as your slow oxidative muscle fibres. Each of these muscle fibres have different functions and therefore are more suited to particular sports. For example, your slow oxidative, also known as your type 1 muscle fibres, are more suitable for endurance events such as marathon running, as they work at a submaximal level and work for long duration but at a low intensity. As these muscle fibres have a consistent supply of oxygen, this means that the muscles can work for long periods of time with little fatigue. This means that slow oxidative muscle fibres can also be used in posture muscles because of their high fatigue resistance. However, your fast glycolytic type 2X muscle fibres work maximally and anaerobically, allowing them to work at a high intensity but for a short duration. Therefore, someone with type 2X muscle fibres will participate in 100-meter sprints, jumps and throws, as these are all power sports and need little to no oxygen to do. Last is your fast oxidative glycolytic, also known as type 2A muscle fibres, which work for medium intensities for medium durations. This makes them perfect for games players, as these muscle fibres can work both anaerobically and aerobically, allowing them to last the whole game, but also allowing them to have bursts of sprints. This could be useful for football players when they have to play a whole 90-minute game at different intensities. However, these muscle fibres can also be used in middle distance activities such as 400 meters and 800 meters. Your muscle fibre characteristics help to tell each muscle fibre apart. Your slow oxidative muscle fibres have the smallest diameter. They use carbohydrates, fats and proteins as substrate fuels, with carbon dioxide, water and heat as waste products. In comparison, the fast glycolytic muscle fibres have the largest diameter out of all 3 muscle fibres and use ATP to PC and the E system to PC as their energy systems. The waste products of fast glycolytic muscle fibres are lactic acid, which build up in the muscles. This is also the waste product for fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibres. Fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibres have a medium-sized diameter, as well as using the glycolytic system as its source of energy and carbohydrates as its substrate fuels. Furthermore, characteristics of the muscle fibres include colour of the cells. Amount of mitochondria and the capillary density can also tell the muscle fibres apart. Your slow oxidative muscle fibres have a high capillary density. This is because of these muscle fibres work and respire aerobically, meaning that they need a constant supply of oxygen. This can be achieved by increasing the number of capillaries, as this will also increase the supply of oxygen and the rate at which it diffuses into the cell. However, your fast glycolytic muscle fibres have a low capillary density due to working anaerobically, without oxygen. They do not work using oxygen, meaning that they do not need a constant supply of oxygen. Although they do need capillaries, as after they perform, there is likely to be lactic acid in the muscles and oxygen helps to break it down and relieve any pain in that muscle. Your fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibers, however, also have a high capillary density because it works both anaerobically and aerobically, meaning that when they do work aerobically, they also need a large supply of oxygen to be able to maintain at their highest capacity, as well as clearing lactic acid after working anaerobically. When looking at the pictures at the bottom of each slide, you can tell which muscle fibers are most common in each picture. Your slow oxidative muscle fibers can be found on the right of these three images. This is because the muscle fibers are bright red in colour, so these ones here. The bright red colour is brought on by the blood flowing through the muscle. The blood contains hemoglobin, which gives it the red colour. As these fibers need oxygen to work, this means that they also need blood as oxygen is carried in it. Your slow oxidative muscle fibers have a high percentage of myoglobin in them, which gives them their bright red appearance. In comparison, the fast glycolytic muscle fibers have a low percentage of myoglobin, meaning that they appear more of a white, light pink colour. In this is because of how little oxygen the muscles need. From this, we can conclude that this picture must be the fast glycolytic muscle fibers. Lastly, you have a pink colour for the fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibers. They appear this colour because they don't always use oxygen. However, sometimes they do, meaning that this is a small constant amount of oxygen leaving and entering the muscle at all times, giving it its pinky colour. This means that there is a medium percentage of myoglobin in the blood. Lastly, each muscle fibre contains a different number of mitochondria. Both the fast oxidative glycolytic and slow oxidative contain high amounts of mitochondria, as they need lots of energy in order to be working at a consistent rate for long periods of time, although your fast glycolytic muscle fibers have a low number of mitochondria because the muscles work for a very short amount of time at a high intensity without oxygen, meaning that aerobic metabolism cannot take place. As you can see in this table shown, what is present in each type of muscle fibre. We already talked about why there are high and low amounts of mitochondria and capillaries in each muscle fibre. So now we shall see about amounts of hemoglobin. Slow oxidative muscle fibres are the most likely to contain high amounts of hemoglobin, which is a red protein which transports oxygen in the blood. This is because slow oxidative muscle fibres work with oxygen and need high amounts of it in order to work. However, fast glycolytic muscle fibres have no oxygen whilst working, as they do not need oxygen to work, and fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibres work with and without oxygen, which you can see here in this table. Therefore, have some hemoglobin. Lastly, in this table we can see that the slow oxidative muscle fibres use aerobic enzymes, whereas the fast glycolytic use anaerobic enzymes. However, fast oxidative glycolytic muscle fibres contain both aerobic and anaerobic proteins because they work with and without oxygen.